Hey, everyone. Just two quick announcements before we begin. So, in this shul, we take very seriously the practice of asking questions of Manishtana Alayna Azeh. So it's not just the first night of Pesach that we ask questions, but the last night we ask questions as well. So just to clarify, the last night, Shvi Pesach, be 2 minyanim here. There will be an early minyan, Mincha just before Plaga Mincha, and there will be a later minyan, Zman as well. So take your pick, whichever one you'd like to come to. And yes. As I said, it was just to get you asking questions. But that is the as things stand. There are 2 minyanim on Shvi Pesach. The phone's falling off there.
You're not hurt, are you?
No. The other thing is that we have the schut of having a very special guest drasha here on Shvi Pesach. Again, Shabbat, you're stuck with me, but on Shvi Pesach we have Rabbi J.J. Shechter is going to be here. He'll be giving the drasha before Yizkor. That is definitely one not to be missed. Okay, so let's talk a little bit in the few minutes we have about the name of the Chag, the names of the Chag that we are currently celebrating in the midst of approaching halfway mark. I think if you would stop people in the street and say, what Chag is it? So very few people would answer back, it's Chag HaMatzot. And even Chag HaMatzos, I think very few people would give that answer. Most people would say, this is Pesach. It's very interesting because Pesach is not the name which the Torah uses. It's not the name does appear in the Torah. We'll talk in a moment, but it means something else. It's not the name that Chazal used in all of our tefillot. We say Yalev Yavor. We don't say B'yom Chag HaPesach Hazeh. We say B'yom Chag HaMatzot Hazeh. Right, and in the Torah as well, this is where Chazal took the name from, Zman Cherutenu, whatever you want, but it's called Chag HaMatzot. And where did it come from? Why is it that we don't really refer to Chag HaMatzot as Chag HaMatzot, but we refer to it as Chag HaPesach? So the truth is that nowadays these two names are interchangeable. But in the times of the Beit HaMikdash, in the times when you had a Korban Pesach, so really it refers to something different. You have Chag HaPesach, which is the day before Yudalid, just before Yom Tov comes in, when we bring the Korban Pesach, right, that is Pesach, and following on from that, we have Chag HaMatzot. This, by the way, explains something very interesting. We know there's a well-known machloket when it comes to Sfirat HaOmer, as to when Sfirat HaOmer begins. Right? The Torah says, the Torah is deliberately ambiguous in a way, when it says, Uspartim lachem mimachorat HaShabbat, right? Everybody knows, mimachorat HaShabbat. What does machorat HaShabbat mean? So famously, we say that Machorat Shabbat means the day after Pesach. Shabbat is interchangeable. Shabbat as Yom Tov. So the day of Chag is a Shabbat in a sense. And therefore, it's Machorat Shabbat means the day after the Yom Tov of Pesach, the Yom Tov of Chag HaMatzot, right, which is the first day. That's the next night. There were those who said, and there were different traditions, those who did not follow the authority of the oral law, who would say had different ways of interpreting, but the Tzdukim famously argue against the Prushim. They were wrong, of course, and they said no. Machorat Shabbat means Saturday, means Shabbat Bereshit, and therefore on the first Sunday, it's easier to remember that way which day of the week, right, which day you're counting. It's just wrong. Is what the Torah had in mind. But why is it? And then we have the whole discussion in terms of about the oral law and how we know what is Machorat Shabbat, Machorat Pesach, etc. So when you realize that. That the name Pesach refers to, we have the day of Erev Yom Tov, Erev Chag, which is the day of the Pesach, the day that you bring the Korban Pesach. It's eaten that night. But then you have Chag HaMatzot. So had the Torah said, Machorat Pesach, that would have been even more confusing. Because what does Machorat Pesach mean? Does Machorat Pesach mean the day after Yudalid, the day after you bring the Pesach, i.e. the first day of Yom Tov? Or does it mean the day after? Pshat level would seem to be, if Pesach is the day of Erev Chag, so then it would be starting a day earlier. When the Torah says Machorat Shabbat, it leaves no room for confusion, no room for ambiguity. Machorat Shabbat means the Shabbat of the Chag, the Shabbat, the day of Yom Tov, the day in which there's Nesor Malacha. Therefore, we start counting the next night. So that is one. That's maybe one way of understanding. It's also interesting. Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev points out something very beautiful. He says, we have two names of the Chag, are named Pesach and Chag HaMatzot. So what do these names mean? What do they refer to? So Chag HaMatzot refers to the fact that we ate matzot, as we were commanded to, as we ate when we were leaving Egypt. We think of it, it's to do with the chesed the chesed noraich, what Bnei Israel did for Hashem, so to speak. The Navi says, right, Zachati la chesed noraich, lechte chay bamidbar be'eretz lo zruah. Hashem, as it were, remembers the kindness that we did, following faithfully through the Yetziat Mitzrayim and through the days in the wilderness. That's what the name Matzot refers to. The name of Pesach refers to what does Pesach mean. So we'll remember Pesach means to pass over. Dilug, Rashi actually says that's the second interpretation. But the other interpretation is that the word Pesach means that he had mercy, right? He had mercy and he skipped over our homes, whatever it is, on the night when Makat Bachrot took place. Pesach refers to the chesed which Hashem did for us. Matzot refers in a sense to the chesed, so to speak, that we did for Hashem, Kiviyah. And therefore, when the Torah chooses what name to call it, the Torah calls it Chag HaMatzot. The Torah is emphasizing the fact of, it's emphasizing the praise of Bnei Israel. When Bnei Israel decide what to call it, that's right. It's a word which is very fitting to the one who said it, Rabbi Yitzchak, right? Then when we choose what name, so we choose the name of Pesach, we want to emphasize the praise of Hashem, we want to emphasize the praise of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that is why maybe another idea in terms of the split of the names. But as we said, they really in the Torah, Pesach and Chag HaMatzot referring to two separate days, one after the other. Nowadays, the two things are interchangeable, right? If you say to somebody, I'm going to celebrate Pesach, and you're talking about the day before, they just confuse everything. One of the things that Mepharshim asks, so it's called Chag HaMatzot. Matzot in the plural. Why is it not called Chag HaMatzah? Right? Why is it Chag HaMatzot in the plural? You'll tell me because we have 3 matzot on the Seder plate, right? Maybe. But so I've seen a couple of different interpretations to this. Different interesting spins. One is that actually the festival of Chag HaMatzot, the week is divided into 2 in terms of the matzah that we eat. There is the matzah of Chovah, the matzah which is a chiyuv on the first night of Pesach. That is when we have the chiyuv of eating matzah. And beyond that is matzah of reshut. Maybe you have the ability to eat matzah, even though the Torah tells us shivat yamim matzot tochelu. The pasuk says you will eat matzah for 7 days. We understand that you'll eat matzah for 7 days means you won't be able to eat chametz. The mitzvah to eat matzah, according to most interpretations, certainly the obligation to eat matzah really only applies on the first night of Pesach, midrabanan, the second night is one chutz laaretz. Okay. But that is the first night. Beyond that, it is at worst not a mitzvah, just a reshut, or at best a mitzvah kiyumit. This is what the Gaon of Vilna says. The Gaon of Vilna says, since the Torah says you'll eat matzah for 7 days, so you don't have an obligation to continue eating matzah for all 7 days. But if you eat matzah, you have fulfilled the pasuk and you have fulfilled a mitzvah. The caveat to this is that it needs to be matzah shmura, but that in terms of that you've fulfilled a mitzvah. But that is the Vilna Gaon. In any way, there is a distinction between the matzah of the first night, the matzah beyond that. So that is maybe the idea of Chag HaMatzot versus Chag HaMatzah. Here's one other interpretation I saw, which goes as follows. If we go back to Seder night, and we go back to the Manish Tana and the 4 questions that we ask, the first time we see the matzah comes up before, in Halach Ma'anya, we start talking about the matzah there. But we ask in the 4 questions, so the Abba Banal has a very, very interesting perush on this. He says the 4 questions are really all one. And the question is as follows. There are certain things that we do, and matzah is really the expression of this. There are certain things that we do on the Seder night which are an expression of freedom, and there are certain things that we do which are an expression of slavery, right? Things which we commemorate the galut, we commemorate the Geulah, so to speak. Which one is it? It's very confusing when you think about it. You think about the 4 questions. So we eat bitter herbs, we eat the maror, because we're going back and we're experiencing slavery. We spoke about this a little bit at the Yom Iyun. The maror is one of the very, very confusing parts of the Seder. The order is it's completely wrong. Maror, we should have said, eat maror right at the beginning, when you're still slave, when you're tasting the bitterness. Later on, you get to the freedom, and then you get to, and then you can have the matzah, whatever it is. Different interpretations have been said. We mentioned some of them. But so maror, certainly that represents slavery. We eat reclining. We don't sit normally. We eat like kings, like free people. That represents the opposite. That's not slavery. We are celebrating. We're showing as if we're free. We dip our food in the way that wealthy people do, and it's luxurious. So it's on the one hand, it's a night of galut. On the other hand, it's a night of geula. Which one is it? And the matzah itself really is the expression of both of these points. We don't have time to go into it now. But if you have a look, what the problem is, again, when we go through the Haggadah, we see it in the Four Sons, we see it in many places. The Baal Haggadah quotes the Psukim very, very selectively. And the problem is that we just believe him, we trust him. If we had time, if we had koach, open up the Psukim and see on some of the sections which the Haggadah talks about, we can discover some very, very interesting things. One example is, in Rabban Gamliel, we talk about Pesach, Matzah, Maariv. So over there we quote Matzah. I'll just quote this to you, and then I'll leave you to think about it. But it says, right? Why do we have matzah? Matzah zo shanu ochlim al shum ma shum shelo ispik batzekam shel avotim lachmitz ad shenigla alehem melech lachem lachem hakadosh baruch hu ga'alam. The reason we eat matzah is because we didn't have time. If I had to ask you, does that represent freedom or does that represent slavery? It's not so clear. It's saying that we were slaves. We didn't have time for the dough to rise, and therefore, and it quotes the pasuk which says, "Ki lo chametz ki gushu mimitzrayim v'lo yachlu litmameh v'gam teda lo asu lahem." Right, and that's the pasuk at the end of the chapter, the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, saying there wasn't time for them to leave, for the bread to become chametz. It makes it sound like it's a very, very unideal, very b'diavad situation. Problem with that is, if you open up the Chumash and you go just a few psukim earlier, you see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us the mitzvah and gives us the command to eat matzah then, to eat matzah later. And that's got nothing to do with the fact that we had to, it's not a b'diavad, it's an ideal. It's an ideal. I'm commanding you to eat matzah. Only later on, it's the idea that we were slaves and we were rushed out. So there is a bit of an inherent contradiction over there in the matzah, which ties in with that contradiction within the four questions themselves. I don't have time to give you an answer now, so you're going to have to think about it.